Roy Caldwell, step away from the property log right now.
What's this about? If this is about the audit, then say that. Don't come into my evidence.
Roy Caldwell operated without oversight for 3 years as the evidence room sergeant at the Brightwater Police Department in Ohio. 40 separate property entries, $340,000. Not one person checked.
Your access card, your handwriting, the corrected intake sheets, and the banded cash from your home safe.
I want my lawyer.
He would not get the chance to explain the safe. Within 90 minutes, BCI agents would carry out 41 banded stacks of currency, every stack still tagged in his own handwriting, every tag matched to a closed narcotics file in the Brightwater Police Department's own evidence room. 3 years, 41 separate property entries, $340,000 skimmed from cash that defendants had already pleaded out and would never see again. The man assigned to guard the chain of custody had been the break in the chain the entire time. Before we go any further, I have to ask, have you ever worked somewhere where one person held all the keys and everyone just trusted that one person to do the right thing? Drop a comment and tell me about it. And if you are new here, subscribe. We cover these stories every week, and they only get worse from here. Roy David Caldwell was born in May 1980 at Mercy Memorial Hospital in Sandusky, Ohio, the second of 3 boys raised in a brick 2-story on Westcott Avenue in Brightwater, a town of about 31,000 residents an hour west of Cleveland. His father, Daniel Caldwell, worked 32 years in the maintenance department at the Brightwater Ford stamping plant. His mother, Patricia, kept the books at a family-owned plumbing supply on Main Street. The Caldwells were the kind of family that paid cash for almost everything and considered debt a moral failure. Roy was the middle son and the quiet one. His older brother went into the Air Force. His younger brother went into trades. Roy stayed home. Neighbors remembered him as the boy who delivered the Brightwater Beacon Herald on his Schwinn at 5:30 every morning, who shoveled driveways for the widows on Westcott without ever asking to be paid, and who never once got called to the principal's office at Brightwater Central High School. He played second-string offensive line on the high school football team. He graduated in 1998 with a 3.1 GPA, a perfect attendance award his senior year, and a yearbook quote his classmates still remembered as oddly fitting in hindsight. Roy Caldwell had written one line under his senior photo: "If you do the right thing when nobody is looking, nobody ever has to look." He worked 2 years at the Ford plant alongside his father. He hated it. The line work numbed his hands, and the politics of the union local exhausted him. In the fall of 2000, he enrolled at the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Office Basic Police Academy, the closest credentialing program he could afford on a stamping plant wage. He paid for it in cash he had saved from overtime shifts. His academy instructors evaluated him as reliable, even-keeled, and observably honest. One instructor wrote that Caldwell showed none of the cowboy tendencies they often saw in candidates of his age. He graduated in the top third of his class. He applied to 4 departments. Brightwater hired him in August 2001 as one of the youngest sworn officers on the force. For the first 8 years, he worked patrol on the night shift. He developed a reputation as the officer who knew every back alley off Riesinger Street, every after-hours kitchen behind the diners on Route 4, and every habitual offender in the trailer courts on the north end of town. He made arrests without raising his voice. His supervisors described him in annual evaluations as low drama, procedurally meticulous, and the kind of officer who reads the entire policy manual every time it gets revised. He married Lindsay Verret, a dental hygienist, in 2005. They bought a modest ranch house on Crandall Drive for $112,000. Their son Braden was born in 2008. Their daughter Haley was born in 2011. Caldwell coached his son's youth baseball team for 4 seasons. He never missed a parent-teacher conference. The Caldwells were the family on the cul-de-sac that the neighbors looked up to because the lawn was always mowed, the trash was always at the curb on the right night, and the porch light was always on when an officer drove by. In 2009, he made detective. By 2021, Roy Caldwell had 19 years on the job. an unblemished personnel file, 2 formal commendations, and the universal respect of every sworn officer below him in rank. That same year, the department reassigned him to the evidence room. It was considered a senior posting, a quiet place to finish a career, a position handed only to officers the brass had decided were beyond reproach. He accepted it with what colleagues remembered as visible gratitude. He had also, by 2021, accumulated approximately $41,000 in credit card debt across 3 accounts. His wife did not know. His brothers did not know. His father did not know. The department, which had never once pulled his credit, did not know either. The Brightwater Police Department occupies a single-story tan brick building on the corner of Madison Street and 5th Avenue, directly across from the municipal courthouse. The evidence room sits in the rear of the building, behind 2 access-controlled doors and 1 biometric reader installed in 2018 as part of a federal accreditation upgrade. The room itself is approximately 22 feet by 30 feet. Steel shelving units run along 3 walls, stacked floor to ceiling with sealed evidence bags, ammunition cases, electronics in anti-static sleeves, and several dozen banker's boxes labeled with case numbers in black marker. A separate locked cage in the back corner holds firearms. Adjacent to the cage stands the cash safe, a 2,400-pound floor-anchored unit with a combination dial and a separate key tumbler. Only 1 person on the entire force carried the combination after 2021. That person was Sergeant Roy Caldwell. The intake procedure on paper was clean. An arresting officer who seized cash at a scene would count it in front of a witnessing officer, record the amount in the body camera narration, seal the currency in a pink-bordered evidence bag, handwrite the case number and amount on the bag's white write-on strip, and present the bag to the evidence sergeant during business hours. The evidence sergeant would recount the cash, log the amount in the property book, sign the intake sheet, and route the money to the city's secured bank deposit within 48 hours. That was the procedure. In practice, every step after the arresting officer's count depended on the evidence sergeant. Caldwell counted alone. Caldwell logged alone. Caldwell signed alone. Caldwell carried the deposit alone. The only check on his honesty was the body camera footage of the original count, and that footage was archived in a separate server room nobody had any reason to review unless something specifically prompted it. The property log itself was a hybrid system. New entries went into a digital database. Older entries, dating back through the 2000s, still lived in paper ledgers stored in 3-ring binders on a shelf above the safe. Corrections to the paper ledgers required 2 signatures by policy. In practice, when Caldwell wrote in correction fluid over an original entry and re-entered a new figure, nobody asked for the second signature. He was the second signature. The destruction backlog was the other piece of architecture. Closed narcotics cases generated cash that, after appeal windows closed, became eligible either for return to defendants or for transfer to a state forfeiture fund. The backlog in Brightwater stretched, in some cases, 3 to 5 years. Money sat in the safe for years before anyone outside the evidence room thought about it. Defendants who had pleaded out almost never came back asking for their cash. The system assumed they would not. The system was correct in that assumption. Every department brochure printed since 1992 contained the same line about the property and evidence function. The integrity of the evidence room is the integrity of the case. Officers cited it during training. Recruits memorized it for the academy exam. Roy Caldwell quoted it during his promotion speech in 2014. The first time he took money, it was $480 from a closed marijuana trafficking case where the defendant had taken a plea in 2019 and was serving a 4-year sentence at Mansfield Correctional Institution. It was a Tuesday in October 2021. Caldwell came in at 6:40 in the evening, 2 hours after the shift change, when the building had thinned out to 1 desk sergeant, 1 patrol supervisor, and the night dispatchers in the radio room. He badged through the rear access door. He swiped into the evidence room. He pulled the case file. He opened the safe. He counted out $480 in worn 20s from a pink-bagged bundle originally logged at $4,720. He resealed the bag with department evidence tape. He wrote a new figure on the write-on strip. He whited out the original ledger entry, waited for the fluid to dry, and wrote $4,240 in its place. He went home. He paid down his Discover card. For 4 months, that was the entire scheme. He took small amounts from old cases. He kept the bills folded in his wallet until he could deposit them at 3 different bank branches in 3 different towns, never more than $900 at a time. He told his wife the extra income was from off-duty security shifts at the Sandusky County Fairgrounds. She did not check. There was no reason for her to check. In February 2022, the second phase began. He stopped putting the money in the bank. He bought a Liberty fireproof gun safe at a Cabela's outside Toledo, paid for it in cash, and bolted it to the concrete floor of his basement utility room behind the water heater. He started leaving the cash banded. He started leaving the original case number tags attached. He told himself it was so he could account for it later. He told himself a lot of things during the second phase. The pattern over the next 32 months was patient and almost rhythmic. He targeted cases that met 3 criteria. The defendant had to have pleaded out, so no appellate counsel was looking at the file. The seizure had to be at least 2 years old, so the body camera footage was deep in the archive and nobody was scrubbing it. And the original amount had to be a non-round figure, $12,380 or $7,490, so that skimming a few $100s left the ledger looking unremarkable. He never took round amounts. He never took the whole bundle. He never touched cash from open cases. He never touched cash from cases involving cooperating informants, because those defendants had lawyers who might come back. He learned which assistant prosecutors closed files cleanly and which left loose ends. He learned which arresting officers wrote sloppy supplements, because their original counts would be harder to compare against his altered figures. The frequency increased. In the first year, he took from 11 cases. In the second year, from 17. In the third year, from 13 more before the audit. The dollar amounts crept up. $480 in the first entry. $11,200 in the largest single skim, taken from a 2018 cash seizure off a freeway stop that had netted nearly $50,000 in vacuum-sealed bills. The total, when the BCI accountants finally finished, came to $340,000 and change. 41 separate entries. 41 falsified ledger lines. 41 cases where the original arresting officer's body camera count no longer matched the property book. His wife noticed nothing. His colleagues noticed nothing. His supervisors noticed nothing. The chief of police, in a sworn deposition taken later, would say only this: "Roy was the last person in the building I would have looked at. That was the problem. That was always the problem." The lifestyle changes were small enough to dismiss. A new lawn tractor, a base boat bought outright from a private seller in Port Clinton, a trip to Gatlinburg the family had not been able to afford the year before, a new transmission for his wife's Acadia, paid in cash at the dealership. None of it loud, none of it visible, all of it explainable, all of it ignored. We are about to get into how this finally came apart. Before we do, if you have made it this far, you already know this channel takes these cases seriously. Subscribe and hit the bell. The next case I am covering is worse than this one, and I do not want you to miss it. In September 2024, an attorney named Marisol Eberhardt out of Cleveland filed a post-conviction motion on behalf of a former client named Devontae Pruitt. Pruitt had pleaded guilty in 2022 to drug trafficking and possession with intent to distribute. He had been sentenced to 7 years at Belmont Correctional Institution. The plea had been routine. The case had been closed. Eberhardt's motion was not really about the plea. It was about a competency issue with a prior conviction that she believed should have been excluded. As part of the motion, she requested the return of the original seized currency from the 2021 traffic stop that had led to her client's arrest. The amount on the arresting officer's incident report was $23,860. The Brightwater Police Department property clerk pulled the file. The amount on the property log was $19,420, a discrepancy of $4,440. The clerk flagged it to Deputy Chief Janelle Orriston, who flagged it to Internal Affairs, who flagged it to Chief Hollis Maddox, who in the space of a single morning made the decision that effectively ended Roy Caldwell's career. Maddox did not call the evidence sergeant. He did not ask for an explanation. He called the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation in Richfield and requested an independent audit of the entire Brightwater evidence room. The BCI sent a forensic accounting team and 2 special agents. Their names appear in the case file as Special Agent Curtis Voorhees and Special Agent Maya Bocanegra. They arrived on a Wednesday morning in October 2024. They asked for the property logs going back to 2021. They asked for the access card swipe records. They asked for the body camera archives for every cash seizure of more than $1,000 during the same period. Caldwell was on duty that day. He helped them set up in a conference room. He brought them coffee. He answered their preliminary questions cooperatively. He did not yet understand what they were looking for because they did not yet tell him. That night, when his shift ended, he drove home and ate dinner with his family. He helped his daughter with a geometry worksheet. He watched the second half of a Cleveland Guardians game with his son. He went to bed at the usual time. His wife later said it was the most ordinary Wednesday she could remember from that fall, which was the part that, when she looked back at it, she could not forgive him for. It was the last normal night Roy Caldwell would spend in his own home. The BCI auditors worked for 19 days. They cross-referenced 642 property entries against 642 arresting officer incident reports. They pulled body camera footage from the cloud archive and listened to officers narrate their cash counts on scene. They isolated 41 entries where the property log figure was lower than the body camera count, by amounts ranging from $160 to $11,200. Then they did the same thing the Brightwater system had never done. They looked at the paper ledger above the safe under ultraviolet light. The correction fluid showed up as opaque white slashes against the page. They photographed every altered entry. They reconstructed every original figure. The reconstructed totals matched the body camera counts. The current totals did not. Then they pulled the access card swipes. Sergeant Roy Caldwell, badge number 0418, had entered the evidence room alone, after hours, on 37 separate dates that had no corresponding logged activity. 37 late-night entries to a locked room where, according to the property book, nothing had happened. Then they pulled the evidence bag weights. Each pink-bordered bag carries a sealed weight stamped at intake. 41 bags on the shelf weighed less than their intake stamp by margins consistent with the missing cash. Then they applied for a search warrant for Caldwell's residence on Crandall Drive. The search warrant was executed at 6:15 on a Thursday morning in November 2024. Caldwell answered the door in a department t-shirt and sweatpants. His wife stood at the top of the stairs in a bathrobe. His daughter, by then 13, watched from the hallway as 11 BCI agents and 2 Brightwater detectives walked through her father's house with a paper warrant and a list of items to seize. They found the safe in 20 minutes. Caldwell had not even tried to hide it. The combination was the date of his son's birthday. The safe held 41 banded stacks of United States currency. The bands were pink. The bands were department issued. Each stack still wore a small white write-on tag with a handwritten case number. The handwriting matched the handwriting on the evidence bags upstairs at the station. The handwriting was his. Inside the safe with the cash were 3 other items. A spiral notebook in which Caldwell had recorded every withdrawal by case number and dollar amount. A separate envelope of receipts for the lawn tractor, the base boat, and the Acadia transmission, and a single folded piece of yellow legal pad paper on which he had written, in pencil, a list of cases he was considering but had not yet touched. The list was 13 entries long. Special Agent Voorhees later testified that the notebook was the single most thorough piece of self-incriminating evidence he had encountered in 22 years with the Bureau. He kept his own ledger, Voorhees said. He kept it because he wanted to know exactly what he had taken. He kept it because he believed at some level that he was going to put it back. The text messages came later. Investigators imaged Caldwell's personal cell phone and pulled 3 years of communications with his wife. Most of them were ordinary: grocery lists, pickup times, a few arguments about Braden's grades. But buried among them were a handful of exchanges that the prosecutor would later read aloud at sentencing. Lindsay Caldwell, March 14th, 2023. Roy, where did the $8,000 for the boat come from? Roy Caldwell. Off-duty hours at the fairgrounds and the casino lot. Lindsay Caldwell. That is a lot of off-duty. Roy Caldwell. It has been a good year. Lindsay Caldwell. July 9th, 2024. The new transmission was $4,000 cash. Are we okay? Roy Caldwell. We are fine. Stop worrying. She had not known. She had asked, and she had been lied to, and she had believed him, because she had been believing him for 19 years. The interview took place at the BCI field office in Richfield on the same Thursday afternoon as the search. Caldwell drove himself. He had not been arrested. He had been asked to come in voluntarily. He came. He sat at a small conference room table across from Agent Voorhees and Agent Bocanegra. A camera in the corner ceiling recorded the entire interview. He was offered coffee. He took it. He was offered a chance to call an attorney. He waved it off. Voorhees began with the property log. He laid out the 41 altered entries one at a time, sliding each photocopied page across the table. Caldwell looked at each page. He did not pick any of them up. Voorhees said, "Sergeant Caldwell, do you recognize this entry?" Caldwell said, "Yes." Voorhees said, "Is that your handwriting underneath the correction fluid?" Caldwell said, "Yes." Voorhees said, "Is that your handwriting on top of the correction fluid?" Caldwell said, "Yes." Voorhees said, "Did you take the cash from this case file?" Caldwell did not answer for 41 seconds. Bocanegra later wrote in her report that he closed his eyes for most of that interval. When he opened them, he looked past both agents at the wall behind them. Caldwell said, "I want to say something before I answer that." Voorhees said, "Go ahead." Caldwell said, "I knew this day was coming. I have known it was coming for about 18 months. I have rehearsed this conversation in my head probably 400 times. And in every single rehearsal, I sat down at this table, and I told you it was somebody else. I told you it was a clerk. I told you the body camera audio was wrong. I had explanations for the ledger. I had explanations for the swipes. I had explanations for everything. And I am sitting here right now, and I am looking at you, and I cannot make a single one of those explanations come out of my mouth." He took a long breath. Caldwell said, "I took the money. I took the money from every one of those cases. The safe in my basement has every dollar I ever skimmed, except for what I spent on the boat, and the tractor, and the transmission. I kept a list because I wanted to know what I owed. I was going to put it back." Voorhees said, "When were you going to put it back, Sergeant?" Caldwell looked at him for a long time. Caldwell said, "I don't know." He asked for a lawyer 2 minutes later. He did not speak again that day. Roy Caldwell was indicted on January 9th, 2025, by an Erie County grand jury on 12 counts. The lead counts were theft in office, a third-degree felony under Ohio Revised Code, Section 2921.41. The supporting counts included tampering with evidence, tampering with records, and money laundering. The indictment alleged total losses of $340,000 across 41 property entries. His defense attorney, Philip Domergue, out of Sandusky, was a former assistant prosecutor who had handled white-collar pleas for 2 decades. Domergue did not file a motion to suppress. He did not file a motion to challenge the search warrant. He read the BCI report, watched the recorded confession, and within 10 days advised his client that there was no trial worth having. Caldwell pleaded guilty on January 27, 2025, to 1 count of theft in office, 1 count of tampering with evidence, and 1 count of money laundering. The remaining counts were dismissed under the plea agreement. He waived appeal. He agreed to full restitution. Sentencing took place on March 18, 2025, in Courtroom 3 of the Erie County Common Pleas Court before Judge Henrietta Calloway. The hearing lasted 94 minutes. The prosecutor, an assistant Erie County prosecutor named Theodore Vanis, read into the record the names of every defendant whose seized cash Caldwell had skimmed. There were 38 names. Some of them were still incarcerated. Some had completed their sentences. Several had since died. Vanis noted that more than half of these defendants would never see the restitution money owed to them because of state forfeiture statutes that had already transferred their claims. Devontae Pruitt's attorney, Marisol Eberhardt, addressed the court briefly. "My client did not file his motion to bring down a police sergeant," she said. "My client filed his motion because he believed the system owed him an honest accounting. The fact that he received one was an accident. The fact that anyone in this building takes an honest accounting seriously is, apparently, also an accident." Caldwell's wife did not attend the sentencing. His father did. Daniel Caldwell sat in the 3rd row of the gallery for the entire hearing and did not speak. When the court asked Caldwell if he wished to make a statement, he stood. He read from a single sheet of paper. "I betrayed the badge," he said. "I betrayed my department. I betrayed every officer who arrested someone in good faith and trusted me to be honest about what was in those bags. I betrayed my wife and my children. I do not have a reason. I had reasons I told myself, but they were not reasons. They were excuses. I am not asking the court for mercy. I am asking only that the court let the record reflect that I am the one who did this, and no one else in my department helped me. I was alone in that room. That was the point." Judge Calloway delivered her sentence without notes. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "the evidence room of a police department is not a vault. It is a promise. It is the promise the state of Ohio makes to every defendant whose property comes into police custody that the property will be there when the case is resolved. It is the promise the citizens of this county make to themselves that the officers they pay to enforce the law will themselves obey it. You broke that promise 41 times across 3 years, in a room where you were the only person with a key, and you broke it with such patience and such bookkeeping precision that the only way you were ever going to be caught was by accident. You were caught by accident. That is not mitigation. That is aggravation. A more competent thief might never have been caught at all. The court sentences you to 6 years in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction to be served at the Belmont Correctional Institution. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $340,000. Your peace officer certification is hereby revoked. You are barred from public employment for life. He was transported to Belmont Correctional in St. Clairsville the following Tuesday. He is currently housed in general population. His earliest release date is March of 2031. The Brightwater Police Department has since instituted dual key access to its cash safe, mandatory rotating evidence sergeants on a 6-month cycle, and quarterly audits by an outside accounting firm. The pink rubber bands have been replaced with bar-coded seals. The man assigned to guard the chain of custody had been the break in the chain. For 3 years, the only auditor was the thief, and the only reason it ever ended was a defense attorney in Cleveland who asked a single, ordinary question about a closed file. This case was disturbing, but the case on your screen right now is on a level I still have trouble believing was real. Click it now.